CHAMPS Live is presented by Lawrence Technological University, where Blue Devils dare. Hungry Howie's, famous for flavor. And the Detroit Medical Center. Do you have a sports injury or are just looking to take your game to the next level? Go where the pros go. Visit dmc.org/gamechangers. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 47 of State Champs Live, presented by Lawrence Tech. You know, the State Champs Sports Network is located on the incredible campus that is Lawrence Technological University. The university has so much to offer you. It's still the best kept secret in the Midwest. I am encouraging all families that can hear me to explore LTU, cutting edge learning, small class sizes, incredible internship and networking opportunities, 26 varsity level NAIA sports, and transferring from a 2-year or a 4-year institution is easy. For questions or more information, contact the Office of Admissions. The phone number is 248-204-3160, or simply just email admissions@ltu.edu. We are live right now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter every Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. My name is Lauren Plant, and we are talking the history of Michigan high school track and field today. There is a great book on this subject, and it's an incredible history, so stay tuned. But let's get to the headlines for Friday, June 5th. The NBA is back, almost. In a 29-1 vote Thursday, the NBA's Board of Governors approved a plan for a shortened season to start July 31st at Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida. The 22 teams with the best records in the league returning to compete in 8 seeding games for spots in the 16-team postseason. The Players Union is set to vote Friday. Under this model, the season would be over for the Detroit Pistons, who would enter the NBA draft lottery along with the 8 other teams that are sidelined in the restart and the 6 restarting teams that miss the playoffs. Detroit Pal cancels football season. While high school football remains a possibility in the fall, one youth program won't be having a 2020 season due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Detroit Police Athletic League announced Wednesday that it was canceling the football season and that all PAL activities are currently under review to see when they can restart. The PAL football season typically runs from the end of August through the end of October. Football coaches walk for peace. A number of high school football coaches from Detroit and the surrounding suburbs gathered downtown for a peace march Thursday evening, walking from Ford Field down Woodward Avenue to the Spirit of Detroit statue. While careful not to call it a protest, they used the walk to express their frustration with what they see happening to people of color around the country and hope to see coaches in other cities emulate the peaceful expression of solidarity. All right, so those are the headlines. Let's get to today's Hungry Howie's Twitter question of the day. What's the first thing you're going to do when loosened restrictions take effect on June 15th? Get a haircut, go to the gym, go to the movies. I'm staying at home. I am getting a haircut. You can believe that. All right, find State Champs Michigan on Twitter and vote. We'll read the results tomorrow. All right, today we are talking with Jim Moyes. He was the voice of Muskegon Sports for over 50 years. I've learned now he's been doing this for going on 65 years. He's also in the Muskegon Sports Hall of Fame. He has a book out that in great detail depicts the history of Michigan high school track and field. It's titled The Fleet Feet of Spring, Michigan's High School State Championships in Track and Field, 1895 to 2018. This is a 500-page book filled with features, pictures, and stats. The first 268 pages are filled with stories of every meet dating back to events conducted by the Michigan Interschool Athletic Association. The next 170 pages packed with every championship listing imaginable, including names of contributors to winning relays through the years and a total list of individual champions per school. Jim collaborated on this book with Jim Hollabaugh, so it's not just an encyclopedia on track, but a great read too. Jim, thanks for coming on.
Well, you hit it right on the head. You did better explaining than I ever could. By the way, it's Jeff Hollabaugh, not John Hollabaugh.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said
this book.
I said Jim Hollabaugh.
If it wasn't for Jeff, you're
absolutely.
Jim Harbaugh.
There you go. There you go.
We'll,
Jeff
we'll excuse you,
Holloway.
Lauren. I'm not sure
Yes,
Jeff
thank
will,
you.
but I will.
All right, I appreciate it. I'm going to have Jeff on the show
Yeah.
regardless. So, but let me ask you this. Why take on a project such as this?
Well, I started doing this just as kind of a lark. It was kind of a hobby of mine. I wanted to write a book on, not a book, but just write down all the state champs and put it in a format and a listing that everybody can read somewhere down the road. And when I started doing this back in the early 1900s, I found out it went way back, way, way back, even into the 1800s, the late 1890s, as a matter of fact. But I thought there was just more to it than just filling the book with just stats. We entered some nuggets that I think people are going to find most interesting. Like, for example, I don't know if anybody knew that Gerald Ford was a place winner in the 1930 state championships down at Old Ferry Field in Ann Arbor. What, you got a picture right there. Boy, apropos, I could say, but he was an incredible athlete at Grand Rapids South, but it's full of interesting stories about guys that went on and maybe unfortunately gave the supreme sacrifice, perishing in world wars and the Vietnam Wars and even the Afghanistan conflicts and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of little interesting nuggets like that just simply won't bore you with statistics.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that you're a Vietnam vet, so thank you for your service. And so many of the young men, especially in wartime years, after high school, a lot of times had to go in service and oftentimes never made it back here. But we can live their legacy. And that's kind of what the state champs mission is all about, is celebrating everything that's accomplished in high school. So why don't we begin? And let's talk about 1935, because there were two guys that fascinated you in particular.
I mean, you got that right. Well, I'll tell you what, the first guy I can bring about was Alan Smith. He was a six-time champion for Paw Paw High School, and he led Paw Paw to back state championships. And then he won and became a great runner at the University of Michigan. Matter of fact, he won the Big Ten in the 220-yard dash. He was a premier sprinter in the state of Michigan in the late 30s and the very early 40s. But unfortunately for Alan, he entered the service and he was killed over in Africa, North Africa. He was hit by a shell and he perished in 1944. And a teammate on this University of Michigan team, who also graduated in 1935 from Saginaw High School, I think maybe the most gifted athlete of all time in the state of Michigan. His name was William Watson. Watson ran the 100-yard dash. There you see him high jumping. He could high jump 6'5". He could throw the shot better than 55 feet. He set a state record that lasted for 23 years in 1935. He was a Big Ten discus champion, and he long jumped 25 feet 5 inches. So he had that combination of speed and power. The guy, except for not being able to participate in the decathlon during the war in 1940 and again in 1944, he would have been an obvious world champion and Olympic champion in 1940 and 44. And he too ended tragically. He was killed. He was a ex-police officer in the city of Detroit, and he was gunned down, unfortunately, in the 1960s, and he passed away at an early age. But those two guys were just phenomenal stories on Alan Smith and William Watson. And there's a lot of other ones. So we had like 25 stories, but that's just a sample size of what we had in this book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought what was cool, William Watson went to Saginaw High, first African-American to win the U.S. Decathlon Championship, first African-American to be selected as the captain of any athletic team at the University of Michigan.
Absolutely. And
so I thought that was cool. Yeah, and I thought what also was interesting from Alan Smith, he held the long jump record for Paw Paw for 78 years.
Yeah, just beaten, I think, a couple of years ago, as a matter of fact. I bet correct. He still has the 100-yard and 220-yard dash championship record at Paw Paw.
He probably does. Sounds like an amazing athlete. Yeah. So how about we move to 1959 and a gentleman named Rex Cawley. Wow.
Rex Cawley. I interviewed 3 coaches back in 1998 at a MICRA conference. All 3 were in my book, Brian Wadfield and Norm Bader and Mr. Crane at Flint Beecher. And I asked them, what is the most significant, most memorable moment that you ever saw in track and field in the state of Michigan. And they all gave me, believe it or not, I asked them in different sequences of time. They all said it was Warren Colley's anchor leg of the 4x220-yard relay in 1959 at East Lansing. He got the baton trailing, it goes from anywhere from 10 to 20 yards behind the leader. And he just chugged around everybody, and he crossed the finish line first, and even the old immortal Duffy Doherty said, that's the fastest guy I've ever seen in my life. He was quite an athlete. He set records that actually at the time were American records in high school. Of course, as you mentioned, as you can see him up there, he won the gold medal in Tokyo in 1964. One of the greatest athletes of all time.
Wow,
and in my senior year in high school, by the way.
Wow. All right. Well, there you go. There you go. So what we're going to do is obviously State Champs has covered high school sports throughout the state of Michigan since 2002. So I'm going to fire at you some names, and we'll get your comments on some more recent athletes, champions, and teams. All right. You ready?
All right. I'm ready.
Okay. All right. So on the boys' side, and somebody we featured a lot, we did a documentary on this gentleman not too long ago. His name was Tyrone Wheatley.
Oh, my goodness. In fact, his son lived right down here in my neighborhood in Creekside. Tyrone Wheatley, by the way, he still owns a couple of records. He still owns a high hurdle record, and he owns a long jump record. He went 23:10 and 3/4, and the following year he went 23:10 and a half. A great football player and All-American at the University of Michigan, and certainly in Class B, he's the greatest runner of all time in the state of Michigan.
Absolutely. How about the guy who ran the 4-minute mile? Wasn't that long ago here at the track championships, Grand Blank's Grant Fisher.
Yeah, he finally broke a record. It went all the way back to 1975, held by Steve Elliott at Pontiac. Yeah, he ran 3:59 and change in a race with the professionals down in St. Louis a couple of years back. And unfortunately, we couldn't keep him here in the state of Michigan. He went out to Stanford, and he's done very well as well. Certainly one of the two greatest distance runners in the state of Michigan. I'm not going to say he's number one, because I think another guy was number one.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the guy who's on the cover of your book, and that's Donovan Brazier from Kentwood Hills, who was obviously
Kentwood Hills.
Yeah, and he was Go ahead.
Yeah, how good was it of Jeff Hollabaugh? Before Donovan even set an American record and became a world champion at 800, to feature him on our cover of our book. And Donovan Brazier, he ran 142 and some change for an American record. He's the fastest in the world. And as a matter of fact, not only is a world champion, unfortunately, because the Olympics were canceled this year, he's probably was going to be an Olympic champion. And hey, he may still be one as yet in Tokyo and 2021, I guess they're going to have it. It'd be ironic that if he could do that, because last time we had an individual champion win an Olympic gold in track and field from the state of Michigan, it was in Tokyo back in 1964. We had three of them win it. Hayes Jones, Carr, and Warren Colley.
Wow, that's amazing.
He's a class guy too. Jeff Hollabaugh was telling me this guy was so grateful that we put him on the cover of our book, and great expectations on the part of Jeff Hollabaugh to feature this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I move on to some of the girls, as a team, especially what we've seen here recently and over the last decade or so, the East Kentwood boys team, 8 state titles in 11 years. They're amazing.
Well, they also have the advantage of running on their home track most of the time. They got a magnificent facility, and Coach Emiot has just done a phenomenal job there. I mean, they got sprinters like you can't believe it. Now they're getting guys that can run the distance races. They got guys at the state champions in the pole vault. His son is a great pole vaulter as well, and in the discus and shot. I mean, they got everything covered, and their relay teams are just phenomenal. And if they don't run at East Kentwood for the state titles year in and year out, they're running just down the road with their arch rival at Rockford. Great program.
Yeah, absolutely. Great program. All right, so let's move on to some of the girls champions that we've had in some of the more recent times and get your thoughts on them. One who is still a D1 record holder in the 100 and the 200. She set it back in 2006, Kayla Mahan.
Oh, yeah. Kayla Mahan, yeah, she still has the records, as a matter of fact.
Yeah,
Tremendous sprinter. And, sprint records kind of come and go, but hers has lasted now about a decade. She went down south like many of our other gravel runners, and she certainly is the best sprinter we've had in the state of Michigan. You can see her right here. She's running all by herself. Looks like her
I know.
solo performance. But, hey, here comes somebody around the bend. But that's how dominant she was in the sprints.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a lot of fun covering her when she was in high school. And to some of that, one of the stars, and this was just about 7-8 years ago, and D1 record holder right now, the 800, 1600, and part of the 3200 relay, Hannah Meyer from Grosse Pointe South.
Yeah, her and her twin sister were dominant.
Yeah.
They still have the 4x800 meter record in the state of Michigan. Well under 9 minutes. I can't remember the exact time. Jeff Hollable, I'm sure, can tell you right off the top of his head. But her and her twin sister, then they had Ursula Farrell, was also on that miraculous 4x800 meter team. She went south, I believe, to Wake Forest in the beginning, or North Carolina, somewhere in the Atlantic coast. And now she's back at the University of Michigan. I believe she may have already graduated, but that was one of the most dominant teams in high school history, but not as dominant as Ann Arbor Pioneer.
Right. So take it from there. When we kind of got going with state champs in the early 2000s, Ann Arbor Pioneer was right in the middle of quite a dominant run.
Yeah, one of the guys that I wrote a feature on, the late Brian Westfield, who passed away right after the state championships in 2015. He won a slew of state championships. I think he won like 12 or 13, something like that. That's amazing when you really think of what he's accomplished there. This is a Division I program running against the best athletes in the entire state. And it's a public school. He didn't go and recruit a bunch of people either. That was just a dominant program. They had hurdlers like you couldn't believe. They were so dominant in the hurdles and also in the distance races, the relays, right on down the line. They were dominant in about every discipline of the sport that they had. Brian Westfield, unfortunately, he's another guy. He raced against Warren Colley in 1959. He said that was the most memorable race that he ever saw. And he says, I watched it from the back. I just sat there and ran with my mouth off, but in awe.
There you go. All right. So if you have any questions or comments, you can ask them now on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. We'll get to them if you have any. But first, let's just take a quick time out to check out what happened this week in state champs history. In 2008, we had a Division II Girls Lacrosse State Championship game between the Academy of the Sacred Heart and Flint Powers. Sacred Heart was going for its fourth state title in a row, while Powers looking for its first. It was a back-and-forth tussle throughout this one, and the game would go into overtime, tied at 10. No sudden death in girls lacrosse, and Jamie Brady for Powers notched 2 goals in the extra session as Flint Powers went on to beat Sacred Heart 12-11 to claim its first ever MHSAA Girls Lacrosse state title. This week in State Champs history is presented by Lawrence Tech Athletics. Recruit yourself at ltuathletics.com. Yeah, it's really a shame. We begin the state finals, the throes of a lot of them now over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And usually this weekend would be reserved for track and field.
You brought up the girls team winning the state championship in lacrosse in 2008. In 2008, not all our people that are in this book were state champions. We got some guys and gals that didn't finish necessarily first, but went on and really developed later. They were so-called late bloomers. There was a gal in that 2008 800-meter race who finished, in the mile race, 1,600 back in those days. She raced and finished in 7th place. Her name was Amanda Rugg. Amanda Rugg in the 2016 Olympic trials placed 4th, 0.3 of a second out of making our Olympic team. She was 7th in the state finals. She ran a 4:26 mile. How many schools in the boys division have school record holders that can beat 4:26? I don't think there's too many. And in that same race, by the way, there was a gal by the name of Leah O'Connor. I don't know if you remember her from a little school called Croswell, Lexington.
Yes.
She finished 3rd in that same race. Later on, she became the NCAA cross-country champion, and she was the Big Ten champion in the mile, and she ran a mile in 4 minutes and 27 seconds. Again, not a state champion. She became a state champion later in 2010, but in 2008, she was way back.
Wow.
Bill Werwine was another one. Remember Bill Werwine at Michigan State University? He was another guy that finished fourth in the state championships back in the middle of 1960. He became a world record holder in the 600 indoor yard run at the time, and he became a Big Ten champion. So a lot of these guys didn't necessarily, and gals, have to win a state championship to become great athletes down the road.
Absolutely. I believe in that wholeheartedly. And this just tells me we're going to have to do this again at some point in the future and talk more about
some of the all day long. I would like to thank the guy who was a co-author of my book, if I could, Lauren, Jeff Hall.
Yes.
Without him, this book would not even have been possible. I called Jeff a couple of years ago and said, hey, could you help me a little bit with this book? Help me. My goodness gracious, he had so much. He was our fact checker. He added stories. How he formatted all those state champions in the second half of the book, I'll never understand. But without Jeff taking me to the finish line, this book would not have been possible.
Right. Absolutely. And I will have Jeff on the show, and we'll talk about this book and his cross-country book.
Right. That's
right,
coming up. Matter of fact, it was just recently released about a week ago. I'm still waiting for my copy. He promised it'd be in the mail, but I haven't seen it as yet. Mail down here in Florida comes by Pony Express, I think.
Yeah, I failed to mention that Jim is down in Florida, and that is where he spends his time since he retired. So he will be having some all kinds of NBA action coming up there fairly quickly.
That's right.
So enjoy that. Enjoy that. Yeah, I want to thank Jim Moyes for coming on to the show today. Jim, it was a great conversation. Thanks for all your years of service to high school sports. The Fleet Feet of Spring is available from Amazon, and it's been reduced, so you can get it now for $20.
Got the book right here.
So, there it is. $20. What a bargain. Get it on Amazon. Jim, thanks again.
Thank you so much, Lauren. It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, appreciate it. Let's take a look at today's clip of the day. And that's your clip of the day. All right, I see you, Kyle. All right, send a link to your clip on any of our social media platforms. We'll check it out. Just might be the clip of the day. Let's check out today's DMC Game Changers, and it's all about your feet.
So to become a faster athlete, train your feet. You're already training your legs and your core muscles. It only makes sense to train your feet because that's what's on the ground when you're running and jumping. Do these exercises every day and you will become a faster athlete.
15 amazing game changer segments, which you can find on all of our social media platforms, on the website, statechampsnetwork.com, on the downloadable free streaming app. You got to check that out. And also on our YouTube channel. And there's a whole playlist there for you to enjoy. All right, let's check out the results of yesterday's Hungry Howie's Twitter question of the day. Should the Pistons hire another former player as their next GM? So just about nearly 56% of you say yes, if only it is the right fit. And let's hope they get it right. Monday on Live, 24/7 Sports, Alan True will be back on the show. We'll get you up to date on some of the latest high school football recruiting news. And what does the governor's recent announcement on the loosening of controlled gatherings, how does that affect perhaps combines or camps for football recruits? We'll discuss it Monday at 2 p.m. And if you know of a guest you'd like to see here on Live, please email our show coordinator. Her name is Amanda, and you can email her by going to amanda@yellowflagproductions.com. That is all for this week. Have a great weekend, and please stay safe.
Right now, we are all longing for the roar of a crowd, the excitement of a stadium filled with cheering fans, and the ecstasy of celebrating a hard-fought victory. But right now, we're all on the same team, and we must do our part to make sure as many students, athletes, coaches, teachers, parents, and loved ones are there when we have the luxury to resume our rivalries and start rooting for our teams once again. Stay home and stay safe.
State Champs Live is presented by Lawrence Technological University, where Blue Devils dare. Hungry Howie's, famous for flavor, and the Detroit Medical Center. Do you have a sports injury or are just looking to take your game to the next level? Go where the pros go. Visit dmc.org/gamechanger.